Today, we're looking at OpenAI Function Calling. You can think of a function as a skill or ability you give to ChatGPT. And we'll look at two examples. The first, a hypothetical water balloon launcher, and the second, a real weather reading function, which gives ChatGPT the ability to see current weather. Now we have an interactive code notebook, which will give you the ability to follow along and fire the code cells. I think this will give you an intuitive understanding of what function calling really is. Go ahead and go to the description of the YouTube video and open up the Colab notebook and let's get started. Colab's great because it's a code environment where we can run Python and experiment. So we've got a fully built Colab notebook here. You're going to go through and just run these cells by clicking this button and run each of them so that we know we have everything loaded as needed, and we'll step through it. Before, I was going to also share, there's a link to the OpenAI docs with the function calling in the description of this YouTube video. You can click that link to look at these function calling docs. It's a great place to start, but we'll step through them in this video, and we'll actually build a real version of this function here called get current weather. So let's get started. Okay, so diving in the Colab notebook, we'll run the first cell, which is to install OpenAI. Pip is a common way to install libraries in Python, so we'll go ahead and run this cell. Once that's done, it will show us a check mark. The next step is you have to get an OpenAI key so that you can use their API. You can enter your key in here, but first you'll have to go to their website. So click this link, go get your key, come back, and then we will continue. So I've entered my key. Don't worry about how it still has that placeholder. I've just left it off so it's not visible, but we're ready to go to the next step once we've entered our key and ran this cell. So make sure to run it. So next we're going to create our launch water balloon function. It's purely hypothetical. We're not actually launching anything, but it's hypothetically going to be able to hit a few locations, the ground, a tree, the moon. And when it completes, it's going to print off in a log saying, oh, we launched our balloon of a certain size and it hit something. And we're going to be able to chat with ChatGPT to use this function. And that's how it's going to define what the balloon size is. So just go ahead and run this cell. Make sure you run that. Now for the next step, this is really getting into the more nitty-gritty details of how this function calling works. We need to define a Python list of functions that we want to give ChatGPT the ability to use. So, this is launch water balloon is really the function that it can use. It's the ability or skill. And the functions list is really how it's going to tell ChatGPT it can use this. These functions can, like I said earlier, they can be really anything. And that's why we're creating just like a funny hypothetical example. And this is basically how OpenAI docs specifies that you need to define your functions. So you need to have a few key values. First, if we look here at the docs, it says we need to have a name key to this value, which in their example is get current weather. So we have that here as our launch water balloon function. And we can see that exactly aligns with the name of this, this function we defined in Python. And then we have a description. This description is important because it helps ChatGPT understand kind of what you've built. What is this ability? What is the skill? So that ChatGPT can decide when to use it. So we just say this is function launches a hypothetical water balloon. And then we're going to have parameters. So really these are the parameters that you pass in the function. So this is the skill or ability. This is like defining what more information about this ability, which is water balloon launcher. So our only one we cared about is balloon size. So it's just going to be like a few different types of balloon sizes. So we see that we define it here, type object, and then the property is balloon size, and it's a string. And then we have 3 different values that can take. It can be a large, medium, or small balloon, and it's required property balloon size. So this is just a very simple example of giving ChatGPT one particular function, which is just launch water balloon. You could define many functions in here, and you could give it a lot of abilities. So we've defined we're going to run this. In the next part of the notebook, I created a chat environment which roughly uses the code from their docs. with a few adjustments so that we can actually like actively chat with it here. So let's step through this. The function that is created is called converse. The part that relates to the docs is this. So response, we get a response from chatCompletion.create. So this is, standard what you'll see in their docs. If you go over here, it relates to this line 36 in their docs. And we're going to pass a model. We're going to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. It's super quick. We're using the snapshotted version of this model from June 13th. So it's supposed to be more stable. And then we're going to pass messages, which is a Python list of our messages. And we're passing our functions list also that we just created in the last code cell. So that's functions is passed right here. And we're going to define, or we're going to pass the argument functions auto, which gives ChatGPT the ability to decide to use our functions or not. And when you call the OpenAI API, they are going to respond with response. We're going to have a messages key value here. And so now we're going to check in this part of the code, we're going to check, did ChatGPT request a function call? Like, if you ask it, hey, launch a water balloon, did it decide at that step to actually do that? Or did it ask, like, what size water balloon? And so this condition here basically is checking, did the response from OpenAI have the key value function call? And so if it does, then we're going to do a few things. We're going to first get the name of the function that it requested to use. Remember, we just have one function, but if we had 4 or 5, then we'd want to figure out which one did it say we should use. So we're going to get the name, and then we're going to pass that to our available functions, which we defined here, available functions. We only have one, so it's going to get us our functions to call, and then it's going to get our arguments, and that's what we defined here as balloon size. So we're going to get back our arguments, and then here I have some print statements in here, kind of called inspectors, so that when this code is running, we get a little bit better view into what's happening. And then we're going to call that function, which is launch water balloon. And so it looks a little funny here in the code. You're probably wondering, you might be wondering, okay, why is it not calling launch water balloon? But that's essentially what it's doing here, because we've got the reference to that function here at this step, and then we're just calling that reference, which is the function, the launch water balloon function. And we're passing in our balloon size to get the response. And our response, as you saw up here, what do we return? We return the launch results. So these launch results will be the same as this function response. And we're going to append the messages list. Messages is important to understand. This is how the ChatGPT API basically handles conversations, right? So it has a specific, we have a specific dictionary that has to have these key values. We has to have a role function when we append it. It has the function name and the contents. But this is just an example of what a message looks like when it's a function, but there's other messages. So like there's the role user. You don't have to type any of this. I'm just showing what it would look like. And that's going to have a content, which your message might be like, hello, can we launch a balloon? Like this is what the user message looks like. And then there's also an assistant. So when it responds, it will look like kind of like this. And it might say, sure, what size? I'm just showing you what the dictionary would look like, but we don't actually want this in the code. So I'm going to delete it. But here, actually, let's just look really quick at the API so you can see kind of, so here you go. So you see that we have a user and it has content. So this is kind of what I just showed you. There's also a system message, which we won't talk too much about, but it's essentially lets you to define what kind of chatbot you have. We don't need to talk about that right now, though. So I'm going to delete this because we don't actually want this in our code. And then we're going to print the system's response. And so the else block is if it's not a function call. So in the else block, we're just going to, the system might just be responding, hey, what kind of balloon do you want to launch? It's not actually calling this function. So, so this code, let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so now we're ready for the fun step, which is we get to actually chat with our ChatGPT assistant, and we get to actually try to call this function. So now we can start our conversation. There's a code block here. You don't have to worry too much about it. I wrote it. It doesn't really relate so much to function calling in the API. This is just so that we can actually have this conversation here locally. I'm just creating like a user message and allowing us to set up a conversation. So let's go ahead and run this. Now it should give us a little input, text input, so I can just say hello. We should hear from the assistant. So I was saying, how are you? So I could say, let me say, let's ask them if, let's ask the assistant if they can launch potatoes. Can you? Assistant says, nope, doesn't have the capability to launch potatoes. Okay, what about balloons? All right, it can help launch balloons. So let's say, okay, let's launch one. It might ask us what kind. All right, it just launched it. So here's our inspector that we saw earlier. So it says, oh, we got a function. So let's see where the code it says that. So okay, oh, we got a function, and then it says, the function name was water balloon, launch water balloon. Then it just decided on a water balloon size. That's fine. It said medium, and it said, launching the medium water balloon. It hit the ground, and so that was that. That was one of the random options. Let's say let's launch a large water balloon. See how it does with that. Okay, so it got another function call and it launched a large water balloon. And it hit the moon this time. Let's see. Wow. Let's see what it says to that. It says, it seems like the large water balloon had quite a powerful launch. So yeah. So that is our first hypothetical simple example of a function call. Next, let's look at a real example. It's going to actually look up real weather data. This will be kind of probably more similar to what you're looking to build. You're looking to build something real, give ChatGPT API the ability to use a real function. So let's look at that. Okay, so let's build this function to get the weather. We're going to simplify it a little bit in some ways. Specifically, we'll just have 5 cities that we can get the weather for. So I define these cities here: San Francisco, New York, so on. We need the latitude and longitude. That's because I'm using a public weather API that is api.weather.gov. And at least how I saw this API, I needed latitude and longitude. There may be a better way to use it, but this is how I built it. So we are going to define another function called getWeatherData. This is kind of similar to what we saw earlier when we built the water balloon launch function. We have a Python function here, and we're going to define all kinds of things in here. Like I've said, these functions can really be anything, and in the future they may look very different than they are today. Maybe these ChatGPT functions will control things in the real world. I mean, people are building all kinds of interesting use cases, but for ours, all our function can be defined in just this block. So we just need to basically hit this API, public API endpoint for weather, pass some data. We're gonna get back a response. If it's a good response, code 200, then we are gonna basically get the value out of this data that we need, which is tonight's weather forecast is under properties, and then periods, and then I guess of index of 0. And so and then we're going to return a detailed forecast. And when we return this detailed forecast, that should be available to ChatGPT, because it's going to add it to the messages list. So let's go ahead and run this code block. Oh, important note, I noticed this isn't completing, and it's because Colab won't let this run until the last code block is done. And because I have a loop, this block is never done. So I stop this block before I can go on. So now we should be able to run this. Okay, check mark, it's done. So, all right. Now this is our functions list. I just created a new functions list. I'm kind of disregarding the old balloon function we created. I'm just creating a new one here, and it's called getWeatherData. Again, this is an exact match to our function here, getWeatherData, and then we're adding it to available functions. But within here, we are doing kind of similar to what with the balloon. We have just one property called city name, And we have passed 5 different values in for the different city names, San Francisco, New York, and so on, that we saw above. And so this is just defining per OpenAI docs. This is very similar to what we did above. So let's go ahead and run this. It's good to go. Now I'm rebuilding this converse function. Probably not the most efficient way, but this will work just because I want to, I think I wanted to make some changes here. Actually, maybe, yeah, it might not be needed, but we're going to rebuild this converse function so that it's going to use our get weather data. It's going to have an inspector prints and all that same information. Okay, so now we're going to enter a new chat block, and when we chat in this one, we should be able to ask for weather data. So we can run this code cell to start our chat. Here we go. Let's say, hi, can you launch water balloons? It says it can't launch water balloons. Okay. How about helping us with the weather? Of course, it can help with the weather. That's great. So why don't we see what the weather looks like in San Francisco? All right, so we got, inspector says we got a function call, and it's whether it's looking for the argument city name San Francisco. So ChatGPT, read our message, and it says, it's like, we need to do a function call, and we need to pass in the argument San Francisco out of the list of arguments that we gave it. And we heard back, mostly sunny, high near 73, falling to around 68 in the afternoon. So I've pulled up our weather here. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it says high of 73, and it's going down to 57, but in the afternoon, it's getting a little colder. So that's roughly right. So I think our connection to our API is working. Let's say, how about, let's see. So we got a function call, and we got our weather for New York City. Say, wow, that's great. What, yeah. So there we go. We built a real function. And it does something useful. Well, thanks for following along. I hope this tutorial has given you an intuitive understanding of how OpenAI function calling works. I encourage you to build additional functions. You can use this notebook. If you have something in mind, try building it in this notebook, or copy the code out of this notebook into your own app. And if you got value out of this, you can hit subscribe. I'll do more tutorials like this about, OpenAI's API and different kind of machine learning topics. So yeah, thank you again.